A couple of things about Caverly. She is, for those of you who might be joining for the first time, Caverly has been a meditation teacher for the last 2 decades. She's also a nonprofit leader. She founded the nonprofit Peace in Schools, which provides mindfulness education to teens and adults. And she's also the creator of Presence Collective, which is this growing community of teachers from all over. For those of you who've been with us for a while and have wanted to have an exchange with Caverly, but haven't been able to because of the tech issues, first of all, thanks for coming back. Thanks for your patience. And I also wanted to invite you to join Caverly's Wednesday night meditation. This is an offering through Presence Collective. It's usually a bit smaller of a group, around maybe 20, 30 people. And it's on a different platform. It's on Zoom. So that is at 7 p.m. tonight, Pacific Coast time. I'll drop a link in the sidebar after the introduction. But I encourage you, and Caverly encourages you to join her tonight, because there might just be more space to ask the questions you've been wanting to ask her. In addition, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Sangha Live. Sangha Live is the platform that makes this all possible. They're offering this daily meditation series, and they also offer other in-depth courses. I haven't yet mentioned that Caverly Morgan has one of those in-depth courses on the Sangha Live website. It's called Bridge to Happiness. And for those of you who are returning, that course is an amazing offering of a lot of the specific tools that she's been weaving into these daily meditation sessions. So I'll also drop the link in the sidebar for that. Again, Bridge to Happiness, an in-depth course offered by Caverly Morgan. And let's see, lastly, as always, I want to just encourage anyone who feels able to support this platform, to support the effort of the teachers and the people in the background. That green button is right underneath me. If you are able to give financially, that's what makes this all possible. So thank you. All right, so I'm going to bring Caverly Morgan on screen. Good morning.
Good morning, Janice. Thank you. Thank you for your service. And a shout out to Cassandra, who's in the background, and she's getting set up to be of service and support this platform as well. As always, a shout out to Jake, who we wouldn't be here without all Jake's technical support. And Jake is the co-founder of Sangha Live. So since I'm doing shout outs, Martin, so grateful to Martin. Martin's a dear friend and colleague, and the one that invited me to do these meditations when he realized that doing 3 a day was quite a lot. So I'm very grateful for that invitation. As many of you know, I've been absolutely loving this opportunity. I like to joke about how, 8 a.m. My time is not normally my time to shine. And I do recognize that's a conditioned belief. And so as we've been speaking about through these offerings, through our time together, it's always helpful to question our conditioned assumptions about ourselves and to challenge them. So this has been a lovely challenge for me. And I'm just grateful every time I show up to be with you all in this way. I really appreciate that, Terry. I got your note at the end of yesterday's call, and then I got one this morning as well, and I very much appreciate your question, and it will inform this morning's meditation. I will be reading it in just a moment. I want to acknowledge that if this is your first time to this meditation, and there's any aspect of what I make reference to that feels unfamiliar to you, please don't worry. There's plenty of opportunity to type in a question. I really put a lot of attention to the best of my ability to making sure I I get all the questions that come through and address them. And as Janice mentioned, tonight I do the Presence Collective weekly gathering through Zoom, and that just allows, it's a more intimate group, as she mentioned, and that allows people to be in a face-to-face engagement because it's usually much smaller. So please do join this evening if you had wanted to ask a question but haven't had a chance to yet. So Terry, you've asked a question about awareness, and friends, we focused yesterday on the collapsing of the subject-object relationship, focused on the beginning steps of what it means to collapse that relationship. In just a moment, we'll move into a half-an-hour experience of meditation. I'll be talking a little bit. There'll be silence throughout the end of it. And as we move into that meditation, I wanted to offer this framing, especially for people who are just showing up for the first time. Often in a meditation practice, we get identified with being I'll say it this way, we get identified with the subject-object relationship. So I perceive myself as aware of whatever the object is. Definitely not bad or wrong. I mentioned recently that that's an incredibly important distinction in practice. One of the first things we do when we're working with teens through Peace in Schools is we drop this phrase, "You are not your thoughts." And I like to reference the way in which often you can hear a pin drop in the room, and it's as though you can hear the self-talk of the teens, like, well, I've never considered myself to be something other than what I'm thinking about. So it can be really helpful to realize, wait, I'm witnessing the thought, you aren't worth anything. But perhaps that thought can be questioned. Perhaps that thought isn't true. Perhaps I am not that thought. So it's Terry's question, which I'll read in just a moment, is about how Terry's making reference to how it's a teaching tool to create that split. But in actuality, thoughts aren't outside the experience of awareness. We aren't a separate thing watching experience. So we'll say more about that. Here's the question. Is field of awareness, which is something I've been making reference to, a teaching tool like separate witness? I can't seem to determine whether awareness is whole of individual from my direct experience. And then yesterday, the way you framed it, just as individual consciousness has unique perceptions, thoughts, could consciousness be the same? So we will be moving into a meditation now, and I just wanted to offer that frame as we explore this topic, this experience, hopefully exploring our direct experience, not just thinking about this. All right, closing that out and inviting you to settle in for an experience of meditation. I invite you to treat this experience of sitting the same way you would if you were in a Dharma hall. I appreciate allowing a sense of reverence to infuse practice. In the same way that if I had a friend coming over who I cherish, I might clean the house, I might cut fresh flowers for the table. I invite you to treat your practice in a similar way. This is the seat that you come to is the seat of enlightenment. Not because of your efforting some faraway experience, but the seat of now, the seat of recognizing true nature now. So lovingly take this seat of dignity. Reverently take this seat of dignity. One beautiful thing about using a bell in your meditation or having the same cushion that you come to, or having cultivated a space of reverence in your house for practice, is that much like repeating negative self-talk or negative stories, conditioned narratives in the mind, the body-mind responds to patterns and habits. So allow your whole system to be habituated to the experience of settling, of knowing true nature. As you hear this bell or come to this seat, return to practice. One habit of mind that we'll explore in our direct experience today is this habit to divide. So we could call this meditation freeing the habit of division, or freeing the habit of separation. Most of us spend our whole day moving through the world, experiencing life through the lens of I, me, or my, in relationship to what's out there. Or as you're hearing, as we begin a spiritual practice, it just becomes a more subtle subject-object relationship. I, in relationship with my thoughts. I see these thoughts, now I want to get rid of them. I try to clear the mind. I long for enlightenment. In your own experience, just notice that habit. What's available to us beyond that habit? To follow this thread of inquiry, I invite you now to bring your attention to awareness. So rather than the attention moving to an object, thought forms, emotions, sensations, bring your attention to awareness itself. For many of us, it can feel like coming home for the attention to be freed from objects, to be released so that it can settle in its source awareness. with gentleness, with awareness itself. Simply explore awareness. Again, rather than being aware of the activity of the mind or aware of sensations or emotions, simply explore with awareness. In other words, awareness is the tool of the exploration that we use to explore awareness. Awareness of awareness. Does this awareness have a certain age? Does it start somewhere and end somewhere? Does it have hard edges? While the attention might move from object to object to object, is awareness bound to an object? Or do objects appear in awareness? While the objects appear separate from each other, one thought versus one emotion, let's say, is the awareness that these experiences arise within separate, divided? Is the empty space of a room divisible? is the empty space of awareness, divisible. These aren't simply intellectual questions. These questions, these inquiries are invitations into direct experience. The direct experience of our open, infinite, aware, true nature. Undivided, unbound. We've assumed we are separate. Inquire into the nature of that assumption. Clear understanding of the truth of reality is the doorway to liberation. Clear understanding of the truth of non-separateness. Is the doorway to freedom. silence. Thank you. Sangha Live always appreciates it when I remind you to use the donate button right below me. So I try to remember to do that after these meditations. I acknowledge many people need to head off to work and don't necessarily stay through the question and answer part of the call. So before you head off, if you need to, please do support Sangha Live and these teachings. Terry, I will check the question box. This is also the moment that you could come on screen. I think many of the kinks with Crowdcast have been sorted out, and so I'd love to try that today if anyone's willing. So Terry, let's see. The first thing is your question, which I read. Okay. Abbas, is it not the case that we have to inquire first and foremost what we are? And then, am I that is aware of experience, thought, feeling? I am the awareness of presence? Or is this the question? I'm grateful. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for voicing this question. Abbas, these prompts that I offered today are pointers. They're, as I mentioned, they're invitations. And those invitations are various ways of asking, what are we? Are we these thoughts? Are we these sensations? Are we outside these thoughts and sensations in relationship with these thoughts and sensations? Again, these aren't just intellectual questions to be noodled by the mind. These are offerings that hopefully invite exploration. And what are we exploring? Exactly what you mentioned, Abbas. We're exploring, like, what are we? In my experience, if we're not clear about what we are, we will suffer because we'll be identified with that which we're actually not. We'll be identified with this sense of a separate self. Trying, striving, reaching, suffering, wanting. So, yes, what shifts when your practice becomes an opportunity to knowingly be awareness, knowingly rest in true nature? Take a stand as presence, if you will. So Abbas, I hope that spoke to your question. Thank you for writing in. Marina, thank you for this meditation, although I missed some guidance. No worries at all. If you missed anything, first, they're recorded. I'm very grateful. If they're not on the caverlymorgan.org website yet, they will be soon. There's also a YouTube channel that I'd love to have you follow along with if you'd like to, Caverly Morgan on YouTube. And those recordings are also on the Sangha Live website. So I invite you to just check them out afterwards. I think on the Sangha Live website, the labels for the recordings aren't in place. And that's something that, again, thank you, Joyce. We have a volunteer who's willing to just give each meditation a title, maybe even a sentence or two about the nature of that meditation. And that will be on the Caverly Morgan channel, so that you can go back and choose which aspect of the teachings you'd like to explore. Karen, the experience of being home has never felt so moving. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Karen. It is moving when we remember who we are. Thank you. Okay, Ian, can you explain what is meant by going into awareness, or the words that effect that you used? What I did was focus on my breath and found myself in a state of stillness. Appreciate this is possibly noodling, but I would appreciate a bit of clarity if this makes sense. No, these questions, that inquiry isn't noodling, Ian. I can feel that you're just wanting to understand and give language to your direct experience. It's very valid in practice. Again, clear understanding is something I value in practice, because without clear understanding, it's easy to be identified with the illusion of a self that is separate from life and be exploring practice through that lens, but not recognize that that's the lens that we're looking through. So going into awareness. So first, let me say this. Nothing wrong with focusing on the breath in meditation. When I trained in a silent Zen Buddhist monastery, that was the sole meditation technique I was offered, focusing on the breath and counting the breath. And you are correct, it can result in great stillness of the mind. So can a mantra practice, so can focusing on sound or sensation. It can still the mind to have the attention on a particular object, albeit a subtle object, during your meditation. What we're doing right now in these current explorations, in this current arc of where we are with the teachings through Sangha Live, is we're exploring what happens when, rather than focusing on a specific object, like the breath or like a mantra practice, or maybe allowing our meditation to begin with that focus, but then freeing that focus or opening up that focus. That point is the point in which I would say we're going into awareness. Now, the truth is, we're always in awareness. There's nowhere else to be, or we could say we're always in pure consciousness. We suffer when we think we're separate from pure consciousness. And we think we're outside pure consciousness, witnessing experience. So this invitation to go into awareness is the invitation to, rather than, here I am, the subject, focusing on an object, let's just say the breath, to allow the attention, which is normally moving from awareness, or actually, I just use this as the metaphor of the breath. Now I'm going to change it up a little bit, so hopefully this won't be confusing to you. We're usually directing the attention it's within awareness, but we're moving the attention from awareness to an object. Now we're allowing the attention to rest back in awareness, noticing that these objects all arise within awareness. So rather than attending to the breath, another way to say this is, what happens when you attend to awareness itself? Ian, I hope that speaks to your inquiry. Thank you for writing in. Next time, if you can come on screen, wonderful. Sandy, how can I better understand when I have moments of touching being open and spacious? I can also feel intimidated by realizing that any crazy thing can happen. Sandy, what you're pointing to is really important. When we're identified with perceiving ourselves to be separate, we think we're in control. It feels suddenly like the world is more manageable because I'm identified with me. And by this, in this frame of reference, I'm referring to me as the ego, the illusion of separateness. But that control is a story. As we free the attention to rest in reality, the reality of non-separateness, the reality of oneness, the reality of true nature being the basis of all experience. As we allow the attention to rest in that true nature, we are clear that we have no control. We aren't the separate self that tries to assert control. So to the ego, it's terrifying to let go into that space. To the heart, it's liberation. I hope that spoke to your question, Sandy. Thank you. Angelica. Hello. Are there suggestions that you gave, sort of perspectives, as in Brahma Viharas, which we can train to trigger opening up perceptions? Are the suggestions you gave sort of perspectives, as in Brahma Viharas, which can trigger opening up perception? In a way, yes, Angelica. These questions of inquiry are like invitations, in the same way that any practice tool is an invitation, something inviting us into direct experience. For example, if I practice love and kindness, that practice is an invitation into a direct experience of compassion for all. It's like it's a route, it's a pathway that's created so that we might access compassion for all. These questions about who we are pathways of sorts into the direct experience of our true nature. One thing that's important to name about the pathways I've been offering, however, is that the intention behind them is that we go straight there. We go straight to the experience of true nature. We don't need to engage in a series of practices in order to get somewhere. There's nothing wrong with engaging in a series of practices, but I just want to make that distinction that with these questions, like let's say the question of, can you be aware of being aware? That the intention of that question, like a Zen koan, is to take us, to bring us straight to that experience. Thank you for your question, Angelica. Sharon, do you have any specific inquiries to structure a meditation session? My mind wanders a lot unless I'm listening to you. LOL. Sharon, because I'm familiar with your practice, I know that you appreciate practices that support you in steadying the mind. So allow yourself to begin your period of meditation with counting the breath, or using sound as an anchor. Or perhaps I know you appreciate Thich Nhat Hanh, Sharon. You might like mantra meditation offered by Thich Nhat Hanh. As I breathe in, I smile. As I breathe out, I know peace, for example. You might find that as your mind settles, as the conditioned mind quiets, that you appreciate the opportunity to then simply be. To simply knowingly be who you truly are. So you can play with that, you can experiment with that. And as I said, you could try using these recordings if that's supportive to you, just so you develop a pattern of this line of exploration, which is again inquiry designed to take us to direct experience. Thank you for writing in, Sharon. Maria, hello. Today, I had a death experience, like I was looking on my life with so much compassion and tender love. Would love to come on screen. Wonderful. We have just another bit of just a few moments, and I would love to have you on screen, Maria. I haven't gotten to have anyone on screen yet today, so that would be a delight. And so we'll see if that's possible. I'm sure Janice is working on it in the background. Great. Maria.
Hello.
Hello. Great to see you.
Yeah, you too. Yes, I had this very simple inquiry this morning when I kind of, I wanted to really dive a little into how to be of service more fully. And the answer was so simplifying for me, because it was like suddenly I heard this very loving voice telling me that it's only to simply living in harmony with myself. And it was like, this is, it's such a small thing in a way, but it really affected me so deeply, because it's like there has been this very subtle tension in my heart. So subtle that I, almost don't notice it, but it's around giving and sharing and, well, all of that. And suddenly this just dropped away, and in that it was like I suddenly, in a split second, I just was kind of face to face with my life, and I was crying, and I felt such a huge amount of release in both, towards me and from the inner life at the same time. It was really like some kind of story of my life, at least in this moment, let go.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, it was like such a deep experience, and I really felt like, as if it was my last moment. It was really like, embracing my life and appreciating my life, but also seeing it for what it was.
Yes.
And then I had another inquiry. It was not so perhaps well articulated, but it was a little more personal. If there was something for me to pay more attention to on my path of awakening, and it was like the exact same answer. And I felt such trust kind of, showering over me in this moment, that everything is as it should be, and that I can really just surrender. So it was, I hesitate to say it was a moment of death and rebirth, because it's not, I don't feel it is within duality. It is more like a deeper realization somehow.
Yes. It's a deeper recognition of the truth of your non-separate being. I very much encourage you later, Maria, to just go back and watch this again so that you can hear your beautiful articulation of your experience, especially if you're moving through the world and you feel identified with the conditioned mind and you feel stuck. Just listen to your own language. If we weren't running out of time, I would reflect back to you everything you said so that you could hear, you could have a mirror for your experience, because you articulate beautifully the experience of realizing, if I were to sum it up, the experience of realizing that when you, meaning the ego, gets out of the way, that's when you're able to truly be of service, when you're in harmony. When the harmony that you're pointing to is the harmony of the recognition of your own being, the harmony of truly knowing your own being and not being identified with an aspect of the personality that wants to be of service. We are of service just through the being of truth, the being that we are inherently liberated, and we liberate others through knowing the truth of that, being the truth of that. So thank you for that just beautiful articulation.
Thank you, Caverly.
See you next time. Friends, thank you. We are out of time, and I very much appreciate your presence. I look forward to showing up tomorrow. If you can join me tonight, scroll back through the comments and you'll find the link. I did see your note. I think it was it was a note from one of our dear Sangha members in Europe, and I'm forgetting who wrote it in now, but it was perhaps we could have a Presence Collective gathering time that's better for Europeans. So I'll talk to my assistant about that. It's a very good idea. Again, I do like that on Zoom we can talk to each other easily. So friends, thank you so much. Thank you for your note, Abbas. Thank you for your question today. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.